Hi guys, welcome back, Jackson here. Today, I'm breaking down 6 of the most terrifying South African animal attacks. From a travel vlogger who walked directly into the path of a territorial giant, guarding its route to the river, to a woman who crouched alone in the dark outside her tent. Let's start our story near Hoedspruit, where a trainee guide stepped out of the vehicle and walked toward a lion that was already stalking her before her feet hit the ground. It was July 18th, 2016, and the late afternoon heat was pressing down hard on a private game reserve near Hoedspruit in South Africa's Limpopo province. The bush was dry and golden, that kind of stillness where even the wind seems to hold its breath. Acacia trees dotted the landscape, their twisted branches throwing thin shadows over cracked earth. Somewhere ahead, partially hidden in tall grass, a lion was resting. Lesta Prim was a 24-year-old German woman working toward her full field guide certification, gaining practical hours at the reserve by leading small tourist groups under a senior ranger. People who worked with her described her as enthusiastic and eager to impress, but that eagerness had a downside. She'd been noted more than once for positioning vehicles too close and letting guests linger near predators longer than protocol allowed. Most of her experience had been with lions habituated to safari vehicle, animals that tolerate engines and metal frames without reacting. She'd told guests the lions were used to people, but being used to vehicles is not the same thing as being safe around humans on foot. That's a critical difference, and it's one she never fully internalized. The lion out there that day had been recently relocated, still adjusting to new territory, unfamiliar with human patterns and far less predictable than the prides she'd trained around. That afternoon, Lesta was conducting a wildlife stop with a small group of tourists. The senior ranger had briefly stepped away to reposition the vehicle, and what she did next broke every protocol she'd ever been taught. African lions are apex predators. Females average between 265 and 395 pounds. Males exceed 420. They can explode into a sprint and close distance before you even register what's happening. Their killing method is suffocation. Jaws clamp around the throat, collapsing the windpipe or compressing the carotid arteries until you lose consciousness. Claws exceed 3 inches. Bite force is enough to crush and tear without effort. And here's what people don't understand. A lion doesn't see you the same way when you're outside the vehicle. Inside, you're part of something large and unthreatening. Outside, you're something else entirely. Lesta stepped out and walked toward the lion on foot. She moved ahead of the group, putting distance between herself and everyone else. The lion was lying partially concealed, watching. The second she broke away from that vehicle silhouette, everything changed. She was upright, alone, and moving. The lion dropped into a low stalking posture, body flat, eyes locked. No growl, no warning. It charged explosively, and I mean zero hesitation. The impact knocked her completely off her feet. There was a brief struggle on the ground, but the lion was already repositioning. It locked its jaws around her throat, compressing her airway and the blood vessels in her neck simultaneously. Then it shook, hard. The force caused severe trauma to her cervical spine. She lost consciousness within seconds. The tourists stood frozen. Intervening would have meant risking a second attack. And honestly, by the time anyone could have reacted, it was already over. This one is hard for me. She was doing what she loved, standing in the place she wanted to be more than anywhere else in the world. And one moment of overconfidence took all of it away. The senior ranger returned to find the scene already finished. Lesta was pronounced dead from asphyxiation and vascular compromise combined with catastrophic cervical spine trauma. The reserve's investigation concluded the lion's behavior was a natural predatory response. The animal was not destroyed. Rangers pointed to relocation stress and the protocol violation as the key factors. I think what stays with me is that she wasn't reckless by nature. She just trusted her familiarity more than the rules. And out here, that's all it takes. Her family in Germany was notified, and the story hit the safari training community hard, a painful reminder that experience with calm, habituated lions means nothing when the animal in front of you isn't one of them. Lesta Prim's story was a devastating reminder of how fast a lion can turn when one mistake breaks the barrier. For Garrick Vone, it wasn't a predator hiding in the grass. It was a territorial giant guarding the waterline, and he walked right into its path. You're right, I slipped back into that formal narrator voice. Again, it reads more like a documentary script than someone actually talking to you. Let me redo this properly, like I'm sitting here telling you this story directly. It was August 9th, 2017, and the late afternoon light was turning everything amber along the banks of the St. Lucia estuary in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province. The water was dark and slow-moving, flanked by dense reeds and mud flats stretching out in every direction. The air was thick, humid, carrying the smell of wet earth and vegetation. Worn trails cut through the mud along the shoreline, and these weren't made by people. These were hippo paths, carved by animals moving between grazing land and water, and they were everywhere if you knew what to look for. Garrick Vone was a 38-year-old travel vlogger who'd built a following by getting dangerously close to wildlife and capturing footage most people would never attempt. His content was bold, often reckless, and that's exactly what his audience rewarded. He had no formal training in animal behavior, no real understanding of the species he filmed beyond what looked good on camera. He'd come to St. Lucia with a small group of friends to shoot golden hour footage along the estuary. Now, this area is known for one of the highest hippo concentrations in South Africa. Locals know the unspoken rules. You watch the trails, you respect the water's edge, and you never, ever position yourself between a hippo and its route back to the river. Garrick either didn't know those rules or didn't think they applied to him. He believed hippos were slow, passive animals, the kind of thing you see yawning in a nature documentary. That assumption was about to cost him everything. That afternoon, he moved ahead of his friends along the riverbank, scanning for angles, camera up, completely locked in on the shot. So let me tell you about hippos, because most people get these animals completely wrong. They are among the most dangerous animals in Africa. Despite those heavy barrel-shaped bodies, they are shockingly fast, close to 20 miles per hour on land. Adult males can weigh over 4,000 pounds. Their jaws open to nearly 180 degrees, and those canine teeth can exceed 16 inches. And here's the thing, those tusks aren't for eating. Hippos are herbivores. Those teeth are built purely for combat, and they can sever limbs, crush skulls, and kill with a single bite. They are fiercely territorial around water access, and if you're standing between a hippo and the river, that animal sees you as a threat, period. A hippo had been grazing inland, lined up with one of those worn trails heading back to the water. Garrick walked directly into that path while filming. He was facing the wrong way, trying to frame a shot along the bank. The hippo oriented toward him. Almost no warning, no vocalization, no display. It just came. Garrick turned and tried to move, but he was way too late. The impact hit him like nothing you can prepare for. Knocked him violently to the ground. Before he could even process what happened, the hippo's jaws came down on his torso. Ribs crushed instantly. He was still conscious when the animal lifted him and threw him. His body hit the ground hard, and the hippo came forward again. A second bite drove those massive tusks into his midsection, puncturing through tissue and organ. The damage was immediate and unsurvivable. This one really gets to me. He wasn't even aware of the danger. He was looking through a lens while standing in the one place you should never be, and he had no idea. His friends watched from a distance. There was nothing they could do. By the time the hippo pulled back toward the water, Garrick was motionless. Emergency responders confirmed what everyone already knew. Cause of death was massive internal trauma from crushing bite force. Wildlife authorities concluded the hippo's response was a natural territorial reaction. He'd blocked its water access, and that was enough. No, action was taken against the animal. What hits me about Garrick's story is he went there to capture something beautiful, and he was standing on a line he couldn't see. The story spread fast online, and within the vlogging community it sparked a brief conversation about where the line sits between content and recklessness. Though whether that conversation actually changed anything, I honestly doubt it. Garrick Vone's story was a brutal reminder that the most dangerous animals aren't always hiding from you. Sometimes they're walking right at you and you just don't recognize it. For Danton Krall, the threat wasn't charging across open ground. It was lying perfectly still, beneath water he never should have stepped into. It was March 12th, 2015, and the midday sun was hammering down on the Crocodile River in South Africa's Mpumalanga province. The water was brown, sluggish, and completely opaque. You couldn't see 6 inches below the surface. The banks were muddy and sloped, lined with thick vegetation hanging low over the water's edge. If you looked closely, you could see drag marks in the mud, smooth grooves where heavy bodies had slid between land and water. There were signs posted along the river, clear ones, the kind with pictures on them so there's no ambiguity. They said crocodiles, and they meant it. Danton Krall was a 42-year-old tourist on a self-drive safari with his family. He wasn't an experienced bushman or someone who'd spent time around African waterways. He was a guy on holiday, driving through one of the most beautiful and dangerous landscapes on the continent. And somewhere along the route, he decided to take a shortcut. Instead of following the designated safe crossing points, Danton chose to cross the river at an unmarked section. Picture this: brown water, zero visibility, muddy banks covered in slide marks, warning signs behind him, and he stepped in anyway. Let me tell you about Nile crocodiles because I think people seriously underestimate these animals. They are ambush predators and terrifyingly good at it. A large male can exceed 16 feet and weigh over 1,600 pounds. They can lie completely submerged for hours, perfectly still. They don't chase, they wait. Their bite is one of the most powerful in the animal kingdom, strong enough to shatter bone on contact. Once they grab you, they do something called a death roll, spinning their entire body to disorient prey, tear tissue, and drag you under. You are not fighting out of that. Nobody is. The most common place for attacks is exactly where Danton was standing. Entry points, the shallow edges where bank meets water. That's where crocs wait, because that's where prey comes to drink, to wade, to cross. It's a kill zone, and it looks like nothing. Danton stepped into the shallows. The bank was soft, the water barely reaching his shins. A crocodile was lying submerged just off the edge, completely invisible. The vibration of his footstep was all it needed. The strike came from below, explosive, instantaneous. Jaws clamped around his lower leg, teeth punching through skin and muscle and locking against bone. He lost his balance immediately. No time to pull back, no time to brace. The crocodile initiated the death roll. His body was wrenched sideways and dragged into deeper water as the animal spun, rotational force tearing through ligaments and soft tissue. Water flooded his mouth and nose as he was pulled under. He surfaced briefly, just long enough to choke on air and muddy water, before being dragged down again. The croc repositioned its grip and pulled him further from the bank. Each roll drove him deeper, disoriented him further, opened new wounds. Between the injuries and repeated submersion, he had no ability to fight back or find the surface. This one genuinely haunts me. He was with his family. They were right there, and there was absolutely nothing they could do but watch the water. His family witnessed everything from the bank. Entering that water would have meant the same fate. A search operation continued for 3 days. Danton's remains were recovered downstream, submerged beneath a log system where the crocodile had cached the body. Cause of death was drowning, combined with traumatic injuries from the bite and rotational force. Rangers noted the crossing point showed clear signs of animal activity. Slide marks, disturbed mud, indicators that should have kept anyone away. The investigation found no failure on the reserve's part. Signage was present. Safe crossings were available. What I keep coming back to is how ordinary the decision seemed. A shortcut, that's it. Across a river that looked shallow and calm. And beneath it was something waiting. The story reinforced what rangers had been saying for years. The still water is the most dangerous water. While Danton Krall never saw what was beneath the surface, the next person on this list had no such excuse. Stellan. Guff watched the warning unfold right in front of him, an elephant screaming at him to leave, and he decided to stay. It was January 9th, 2017, and the morning air was still cool at Luluva Imfolozi Park in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province. The landscape was wide open, rolling hills of green and gold bushveld, scattered with fever trees and patches of thick scrub. A waterhole sat in a shallow depression ahead, its edges trampled into dark mud by the constant traffic of animals coming to drink. A small herd of elephants had gathered there, some wading knee-deep, others standing along the bank, trunks curling into the water. From a distance, it looked peaceful, postcard stuff, the kind of scene that makes you forget where you actually are. Stellan Guff was a 51-year-old tourist visiting the park with a group of friends. No background in wildlife behavior, no real experience with African animals beyond what he'd seen on TV. And look, I get it. There's something about seeing an elephant in the wild that hits different than any zoo or documentary. But excitement without understanding is a dangerous combination out here. The group had driven to the waterhole and stopped at a safe viewing distance. Other vehicles were parked nearby, windows down, cameras clicking. Everything was calm. But Stellan wasn't satisfied with the view from inside. He wanted closer. He opened the door and stepped out. So let me talk about elephants for a second, because I think people have this completely wrong. You see the gentle giant thing, and you stop thinking. African elephants are the largest land animals on Earth. A bull can weigh over 13,000 pounds and move at speeds up to 25 miles per hour when charging. At that size, you feel the ground shake. But here's what you really need to understand. Elephants tell you before they attack. They give you warnings, clear ones, ears flared wide, trunk raised, head shaking, mock charges where they stomp forward and stop short. That's the animal telling you to leave. And if those signals escalate, ears pin back, head drops low, trunk tucks underneath, that's not a warning anymore. That's a decision. Once that switch flips, you're not outrunning it, you're not dodging it, and you're not changing its mind. The moment Stellan stepped out, one of the bulls turned toward him. It performed a textbook mock charge. Ears spread wide, trunk up. A short burst forward followed by a hard stop. The ground vibrated. Dust kicked up. Every other vehicle in the area went dead quiet. Stellan didn't get back in the vehicle. I don't know what was going through his head, and I'm not going to pretend I do. But he stayed outside, standing upright, fully exposed. And the elephant's behavior shifted. Ears came down, head dropped, trunk tucked tight against the chest. If you know anything about elephants, you know exactly what that means. It charged. Full speed, no bluff, no hesitation. The distance closed in seconds. The impact. I mean, imagine over 6 tons just driving straight into you. Stellan was knocked to the ground instantly, but the elephant didn't stop. It kept moving forward, driving over him. The first trampling blow came down on his chest. Ribs collapsed under the pressure. Then again, and again. Each step brought thousands of pounds of force down onto his body. His ribcage crushed inward, compressing lungs and heart. Internal hemorrhaging was immediate and catastrophic. I have to be honest with you. This is one of those stories where I just sit with it. The animal told him. It literally showed him what was coming. Ears out, trunk up, mock charge. That's an elephant begging you to leave. And he just didn't. The rest of the group stayed inside their vehicle. There was nothing anyone could do once that charge began. Rangers confirmed Stellan was dead at the scene. Cause of death was chest compression and internal hemorrhage from elephant trampling. The park's investigation found no fault with staff or infrastructure. The elephant followed a clear escalation, warning displays, then a defensive charge after those warnings were ignored. The animal was not destroyed. Elephant did everything right. It gave him every chance to walk away, every single one, and he didn't take any of them. The story spread through wildlife tourism circles as another reminder that these animals aren't attractions. They're wild, they're enormous, and they're communicating the entire time, if you're willing to listen. Stellan Guff had every warning handed to him, and still didn't move. But for Miran Slat, there was no warning at all, just the sound of something circling in the dark outside her tent, drawn in by a mistake she didn't even know she'd made. It was October 2nd, 2018, and the night had settled heavy over a perimeter campsite on the edge of Kruger National Park in South Africa. No fences, no barriers, just canvas tents, a fire pit, and the bush pressing in from every direction. The kind of place that sells you on sleeping under the stars with nothing between you and the wild. And I mean nothing. The air was warm and dry, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke and whatever had been cooked for dinner. If you listened carefully, you could hear movement in the darkness, rustling grass, the occasional crack of a branch, and somewhere beyond the firelight, vocalizations. Whooping, cackling calls carrying across the flat terrain. Hyenas. They'd been active in the area for weeks. Miran Slat was a 29-year-old tourist staying at the campsite with her partner during a safari trip. She wasn't a wildlife expert or someone who'd spent time in the African bush before. She was on vacation, staying at a camp that marketed itself as an authentic wilderness experience. And to be fair, it was authentic. That was the problem. The campsite had known hyena activity. Staff were aware that spotted hyenas regularly moved through the area, and the animals had become habituated to human food sources over time. Cooking residue, scraps, improperly stored waste, all of it had been conditioning these hyenas to associate the camp with easy meals. Those vocalizations Miran heard that night weren't random. Those animals knew exactly where they were. Let me tell you about spotted hyenas, because most people picture some scrawny scavenger skulking around in the background. That's not what these animals are. They can weigh up to 140 pounds, run in organized groups, and their bite force is one of the strongest of any mammal, strong enough to crush bone. They're not just scavengers, they're active hunters that take down wildebeest, zebra, even young buffalo. And they're smart, uncomfortably smart. They test situations, they circle, they probe for weakness. Once they identify vulnerability, they commit fast and they commit together. That night, Miran left the safe area of the camp. She moved towards the perimeter where food waste had been left exposed. She was crouched low, and I need you to understand what that looks like to a hyena. A human standing upright is one thing. A human crouched in the dark, near a food source, moving slowly. That's something small and accessible. A hyena approached from the darkness, cautious at first, circling wide before tightening the distance. Then it delivered an exploratory bite to her lower body. The force knocked her off balance and she fell. And this is where everything accelerated. The sounds she made, the distress, the panic, that's a trigger. Hyenas are wired to respond to distress vocalizations. It signals vulnerability. It signals prey. More hyenas converged from different angles. The bites came fast. Legs, torso, arms, each one tearing through clothing and into tissue. Hyenas don't kill like a lion does. There's no single suffocating bite. They pull you apart. They bite and tear and keep going. Miran tried to retreat. But she was already on the ground, already overwhelmed. The feeding behavior escalated once the group confirmed she couldn't fight back. Blood loss mounted with every wound. I'm going to be real with you. This one is difficult. She was on a trip that was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, and she walked into something she had no way of understanding, at a camp that should have done more to prevent exactly this. Her partner and other campers couldn't intervene. Cause of death was confirmed as exsanguination from multiple bite wounds. The investigation flagged the campsite for repeated predator food conditioning. Improper waste management had been drawing hyenas in for some time. Strict hygiene protocols were reinforced across the region. The incident raised hard questions about the responsibility of unfenced camps operating in active predator zones. What stays with me is that this wasn't really her mistake. The camp created the conditions. The hyenas learned the kai pattern, and Miran just happened to be the one there when it all came together. Her story became a persistent talking point in South African tourism. How much risk is acceptable when you're selling people the wilderness? Every story so far, there was something. A warning sign, a protocol, a moment where the person could have turned back. Tildebrand never got that moment. By the time she realized something was wrong, it was already behind her. It was May 27th, 2018, and the sun was dropping fast over Sabi Sands Game Reserve in South Africa. That golden hour light was fading into something darker, and the bush was doing what it always does at dusk, shifting. The birds go quiet, the shadows stretch, and the animals that hunt by ambush start to move. The lodge sat unfenced on the edge of the reserve. Beautiful place. Open-air dining, walkways between buildings, the whole luxury safari experience. Staff had warned guests about predator movement during the transition hours, that window between daylight and darkness when visibility drops and the rules of the bush change. Leopards in the area were partially habituated, comfortable enough around human infrastructure to move through it, but absolutely still wild, still predators. Tilda Braun was a 33-year-old solo traveler staying at the lodge. She'd come to South Africa on her own, which takes a certain kind of confidence. Traveling solo through Big Five territory isn't something most people do. She wasn't reckless by nature. She wasn't ignoring rules for a thrill. By all accounts, she was someone who loved travel and wanted to experience the bush up close. But that evening, as the light was failing, Tilda walked between buildings alone. No escort, no companion, just her, moving through open space as dusk settled in. I need to talk to you about leopards, because I think they're the most unsettling predator on this continent. Not the biggest, not the strongest, but pound for pound, the most efficient killer out there. A male leopard can weigh up to 200 pounds, but even females at 130 are devastatingly powerful. They are solitary ambush hunters. They don't chase you down across open ground like a lion. They wait, they watch, and they close the distance without you ever knowing they're there. Their approach is silent, genuinely silent. Padded feet, low body, using every piece of cover available. Grass, shadow, furniture, walls, whatever's there. They attack from behind almost every time, targeting the neck. Their killing method is precise, a bite that compresses the airway and blood vessels simultaneously. You lose consciousness in seconds. These animals drag prey twice their weight into trees. The strength-to-size ratio is hard to believe. Tilda was walking through the lodge grounds, partially bent forward, adjusting something she was carrying. She paused. And I need you to understand what that looked like from the leopard's perspective. A lone figure, dusk light, crouched. Posture, stationary, distracted. Every one of those is a vulnerability cue to an ambush predator. The leopard had been using vegetation and shadows along the walkway for concealment. It closed the distance without a sound. Tilda had no idea it was there. It launched from behind. The impact drove her forward and down, body hitting the ground hard. Claws anchored deep into her back, pinning her immediately. There was a brief struggle, arms moving, body twisting, but the leopard was already repositioning. It secured a bite around the back of her neck, clamping down on her airway and the blood vessels on both sides. The pressure was immediate and total. Her movements slowed within seconds. The compression cut off oxygen and blood flow to the brain simultaneously. She went limp. This one really messes with me. She didn't make a dramatic mistake. She didn't ignore a warning or push a boundary. She walked between two buildings at the wrong time of day, and something was watching her the entire way. Staff discovered the scene shortly after. Emergency responders confirmed the cause of death as asphyxiation and vascular compromise from a sustained neck bite. The back injuries from the initial strike were severe, but secondary to the killing bite. The lodge reinforced strict dusk movement policies. No guest movement between buildings without an armed escort after a certain hour. The investigation attributed the attack to predator habituation and human vulnerability cues. The leopard had grown comfortable navigating the lodge grounds, and Tilda's posture, isolation, and timing aligned with exactly the kind of target a leopard is built to exploit. The animal was monitored, but not destroyed. What I can't shake about Tilda's story is how quiet it was. No charge across open ground, no roaring, no warning, just silence, and then it was over. Her story didn't make massive headlines, but within the safari industry, it reinforced something guides already knew. Dusk belongs to the leopard, and if you're moving through their space alone, you might never hear what's coming.